All right, we are back with one of our nutrient maximizer segments. We saw such a great value in this information that we learned during the winter months before this growing season got started. It's now time to bring it back and grab some more of the expertise coming out of Taylor Ferguson, the nutrient maximizer strategic account manager for Indiana, Ohio, and Michigan, and Farm4Profit, all of its audience. He didn't realize he got an extra layer of responsibility today. Welcome back, Taylor.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Glad we can get the message out there.
Did you have fun last time?
Did. It was a good time.
All right, so now I want to know what you've learned or what we missed. Why is it important for us to think about including these products this fall?
You think about a lot of the applications that happen in the fall, specifically in the western part of the Midwest. So you think about Illinois, Iowa, there's a lot of fall ammonia. That's a lot of time that nitrogen is laying out there in that field. And so we need to make sure that we are extending the lifeline of that overall, getting it to that spring time frame. And so when we use InServe or Instinct NextGen, that's going to help us kind of get us over that hump to keep it readily available for that crop the next growing season.
Yeah, because that's one of the things that we had talked about was the difference between spring apply and fall applied. We're addressing the listeners right now. We're in the fall season. What can we do to make sure it's still going to be there in the spring?
Yeah, absolutely. It's making sure that we have a full rate of InServe or a full rate of Instinct NextGen, depending on what we're applying. Kind of like we reviewed last time, InServe is for anhydrous ammonia, Instinct NextGen is for UAN, urea, and manure. A lot of manure applications happen in the fall, sometimes some urea applications as well. And so using a full rate during that fall time frame is very important to get that nitrogen availability all the way through that spring season.
Yeah, when you talk manure and even some of the nitrogen applications, sometimes producers are doing them out of necessity. They have to. This is the only time that it's available or it's forced into this time window. And it's nice to know that there's something they can put in with their application process to ensure that they got their best opportunity to be set up next spring. So if they want to learn more about these products, how do they do that?
Best places to reach out to your local retailer or your Corteva AgriScience territory manager, or go to nitrogenstabilizers.com.
I appreciate you, Taylor, sharing that with our audience again.
You bet.
As the Nutrient Maximizer Strategic Account Manager, we still need to come up with a better acronym for your title within your position there. But in your role and the level of expertise that you have, we're sitting here in the fall. Our farmers are getting their equipment ready. What's the next step that they need to take on?
Great question. There is a lot of equipment aspects and pieces when it comes to fall applications, especially when you think about anhydrous ammonia. There's all sorts of toolbars, knives, hoses, pumps that we need to be thinking about. So just making sure that we're actively looking over that equipment, making sure that any hoses that are pinched or crimped don't have any cracks in them. We're not going to have any mid-season leaks or blowouts. So just really thoroughly looking over all of our equipment is going to be really important. That way we can avoid any of those major disruptions in the middle of the fall season.
Okay, so the equipment's ready. What do we need to think about next?
Equipment's ready. Let's make sure when we begin making those applications that we are thinking about the soil temperature. Um, we really want the soil temperature to be 50 degrees and falling, so steady at that 50 degrees and then falling below that. That's going to help decrease that nitrification process, especially when we have InServe or Instinct NextGen with it. It's going to really decrease the activity of that nitrous monas bacteria, slowing that overall conversion rate from ammonium to nitrate.
Yeah, so is that going to be different for our producers all across our listening base?
Time frame wise, yes. It's going to depend on where you're at within the U.S. and where we're making these fall applications. The biggest rule of thumb is that 50 degrees and falling for the most part.
Yeah, I like that. And if our listeners have more questions for you or want to learn more about the products that they can put in during these application processes, tell them what those are and how they can find out that information.
Absolutely. So reaching out to your local retailer or Corteva territory manager, as well as going to nitrogenstabilizers.com.
Wow, I love it. Thanks again for jumping on with us, Taylor, and providing our listeners with a little bit of value this fall.
Thank you.
And we're back with Taylor Ferguson, our nutrient maximizer strategic account manager. I'm going to say over and over and over again because I love how you're bringing benefits to our audience. You are trying to maximize their nitrogen application, making sure that it's all going to be here next spring. We've already talked a little bit about what applications we can include the products in on. You last gave us a little tip on how we are going to make sure our equipment's ready and what weather we need to be paying attention to. What is next? Equipment's good to go. We're 50 degrees and falling. What do we need to think about next?
I think the next big thing that we really need to be thinking about as growers, or at least from a grower perspective, is to really have that overall realistic goal, and that's going to be a yield goal. So we want to make sure, if you look into the future as best as we can right now with the way commodity prices are, the pricing of nitrogen and everything like that, how can we maximize that overall amount of nitrogen that we are investing a lot of money into in the economy and the market that we're going to be going into in 2025. And so when we build an actual solid plan of how we're going to reach those specific yield goals that we have, it's really going to set us ultimately up for success to get more bushels in the bin at the end of the season.
Yeah, and I think that's an important factor for our listeners. We're farming for profit, and now that profit margin is something we have to pay more attention to, even closer than we ever had before. As we do these segments in the fall, that doesn't mean that this is the only time or the best time for your operation to apply your nitrogen, right?
Correct. Yeah, we have a lot of flexibility. A really big highlight of that fall application is extending your workload essentially at the beginning of the year. We don't have to really run and gun. If we get all of our nitrogen put on in the fall, we can kind of have some time to get everything in the ground, corn seed wise, in a timely manner without having to overlap all of our work.
Yeah, so this not only provides you the opportunity to preserve the nitrogen that you've purchased and put into your soil, it also provides you the flexibility to do the right thing come next spring.
Absolutely.
So if our listeners want to learn more about InSync and InServe, how best do they do that?
Reach out to your Corteva AgriScience territory manager, local retailer, or go to nitrogenstabilizers.com.
Well, thanks for joining us, Taylor.
Thank you.
Well, here we go. We're back with Taylor Ferguson. We've got another nutrient maximizer tip that we want to provide you this fall as you think about your application process. We do and have been sharing these tips with you about making your fall fertilizer applications, but ultimately I want to dive into it, Taylor. How do we get the most benefit out of fall applied versus spring applied nitrogen?
The way to get the most benefit out of your fall applied is make sure you're utilizing a really reputable nitrogen stabilizer like Inserve and Instinct Next Gen, depending on the source that you're applying. That's going to give you that overall trust that that nitrogen is going to be there in the springtime when we go out and put the corn in the ground. And whether that's splitting into two applications and coming back with a side dress application, it's going to give you that overall confidence that we have made the most out of that investment and we're going to minimize all as much loss as we possibly can below ground.
Yeah, that's an important. Tighter margins means we need to preserve all of those assets that we have, including the ones that we put in the soil. How does the product work and establish that, providing us that guarantee?
Yeah, so the way that product works specifically is the active ingredient in it, or is nitropyrin, or also known as optonite technology. And essentially, what it does is it works on the enzyme that Nitrosomonas bacteria feeds off of. And so that's the bacteria that overall ignites the conversion of ammonium to nitrate. And so when we add nitropyrin to the soil, it's going to slow that overall process and starve that enzyme from that bacteria to be able to feed on it, therefore keeping that ammonium in that positive form significantly longer, to where it's going to keep your nitrogen more available longer term.
I like that. And this has been a great set of segments for us to share with our listeners this fall, especially sharing your expertise. But if they are concerned or want to learn more about what to do with spring applied nitrogen, how should they do that?
Yeah, so reach out to your local retailer, your Corteva AgriScience territory manager, or go to nitrogenstabilizers.com.
Thanks again, Taylor.
Thank you.